Alasdair, hello.
Hello, my darling, my love, my sweet little butterbean. How are you doing?
My sweet little butterbean is a affectionate term I don't think I've heard before. But I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I've got a week off, and I spent it today in IKEA.
Oh my god, how was that?
Well, I thought it would take an hour, and it took about 3. Literally, and I wasn't actually buying very much. I filled up kind of like one little, I didn't fill a basket. I filled like a normal bag for life. Okay.
That's fine.
Items, which includes like a drying rack for your like dishes. So it wasn't crazy, but it just takes so long. The maze in there is crazy, and I was a bit overstimulated towards the end. At the start, I was like, oh, day out, la 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 la. Towards the end, I was wearing kind of a very warm coat, a hoodie, and I had a backpack on, which was empty, but it's all layers. And
it all added together.
I limped towards the meatballs at the end, and the queue for the meatballs, it was so long. Like, could they put you in a little winding queue when you're waiting for your meatballs and mash and everything? I started watching a show.
In the queue?
That's how slow that queue was.
Do you go for meatballs in the canteen, or do you go like at the end in the food court?
Oh, no, I went back up to the proper canteen.
See, no, I can't do that. I either go to an IKEA and go to the canteen first, get my food, then do the shop, or I go in, do the shop, and then go to the food court at the end, and I'll grab like a hot dog, fries, and a little thing of meatballs.
If I had the chance again, I'd go back and do that, because what I didn't realise, having limped right into there, and I bet, just cooled down having had my meatballs, that I'd fought for and watched half of a Channel 4 show. Really funny one, by the way, from 2017 called My Psychic Life. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Really recommend it.
Really? I've never heard it, but I will look for it.
It's incredibly well produced and edited. It's very funny. It's like a documentary about people who are psychic mediums. Very funny. So I then realized that you can't just now leave. You have to walk all the way around, like at least half of the circuit again to get back out and back downstairs through the plants. Anyway, by the end of it, I was pretty shattered. But I had a nice day. I had a nice day.
No, I'm glad. IKEA is the kind of place where you always are excited to go, and you get there and you're like, oh my god, I'm at IKEA. This is so cool. This is so fun. And then within I'm not kidding, 10 minutes.
Within 10 minutes,
it's hell.
you've seen so much of it before. There's like when you get to a gem there are gems in IKEA, and like there are some things that are so cheap that it's just like, oh, like better than Amazon prices, like simple things you seem like, oh my god, of course I need that, da 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 da, and they're like proper quality of life things, little improvements around the house. Oh my god, it feels incredible. It's like cleaning your own brain out. It's so nice.
I love it. Well, if this wasn't a natural transition to the episode, I don't know what is.
So we thought this week it would be really fun to just have a conversation about what do we call this one? I'm the showrunner now. Look at me, I'm the showrunner now.
I definitely, we were wondering, if we were given the golden ticket and we had the reins to the show for, say, a series, and we were like, we could do anything we wanted, and we were like, look at me, I'm the showrunner now.
Yeah.
These are the things, maybe like touch into like what's been done before, what we think is going to happen now, but the majority of what we wanted to do here was just have a chat. Have you got a snack? You got a drink? Pull up a chair. We're going to have a chat, and like, if you were in charge of Doctor Who, what you would want to see, what you would want to do.
Yes.
By you, I mean us, but...
Very much an audience participation one here. I think we're going to want lots of ideas on the Twitter, in the Insta DMs. Let's talk about it. It's already interesting, I think, that you've called it the golden ticket, because I wonder, Sam, is it a golden ticket, or is it something of a... I don't know if a poison chalice is the word I want.
It's a tricky one, because I feel like it is the dream of a Doctor Who fan to be able to do whatever they want with it, to choose the storylines of the show, choose the direction they're going for the Doctor, do whatever they want. But then in the same breath, it is a very difficult job, and it is a big burden to bear, and it comes with a lot. I mean, we know what Doctor Who Twitter is like, with people chiming in about what they think about what's happened before, what they think what's happening next, and all that kind of stuff. Having that directed personally to you, and, praise or blame, one or the other, it's coming to you as the showrunner, deserved or not, and it's a very difficult role.
It's a very difficult role, and I think there's probably a time when I dreamt about doing it. And imagine I think I've never really dreamt about doing the job. I think I dream about the idea of having a nice, neat, packaged, complete, and well-received series of Doctor Who under my name, not the idea of actually carrying that pressure. And I think what's become very apparent since RTD has come back is the amount of work that goes into something like this, as well as the amount of industry knowledge and experience that's required to carry something like this, the kind of big decisions you have to be able to make, the corners you have to fight. I would be overwhelmed, and being utterly underqualified, I would immediately resign.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, when Russell brought Doctor Who back, and I know obviously he wasn't the only person, but I feel like he was like instrumental in bringing Doctor Who back in the early noughties. It never, I mean, obviously we were kids and just consuming it as media, but it didn't seem like it was hard work to make the show. Everyone was enjoying it. What was coming out of the show was good. The changes that were being made were very, at least widely well received. And it seemed like a really great job. And then when it went over to Stephen Moffat, I think that was when it became clear that Russell had problems, as anyone would, and it was a difficult role. And taking on that role was something, that had to be considered, that had to be decided if it was something they wanted to do. It helped that they worked on it before, and there were a lot of like factors at play that may not have been clear at the start.
Yeah, I like that you say it seems so easy, us being 8 years old watching the show with our copy for shooting scripts. I could write this. No, I know what you mean though, in that it felt like it was all being so well received and it was so immediately popular that surely it wasn't that hard to get right. But yeah, it seems that both RTD and Stephen Moffat have suggested it was very hard to find someone to take over from them.
Yeah.
In the case of Russell, Moffat, I think, was basically the only choice for the role. And from what I hear, all of this is broadly rumor. There's various sources,
Speculation, honey.
We're speculating. I'm willing to be corrected, yada, yada, yada. Disclaimer right there. Don't trust me. Like chat, how ChatGPT hallucinates information and then won't cite itself?
Yeah.
No, RTD, I think, had to persuade the BBC that Moffat could carry the show forward. And then flash forward to Moffat, who had a pretty long and successful run. There was a lot to be said for his era. It exploded in international popularity under his reign, and there was a lot of great changes, and he oversaw 2 Doctors.
I always forget just like Stephen Moffat's run was a lot longer than Russell Davies went from 2005 to 2009, 4 years, and Stephen Moffat went from 2010 to 2017. So that's 7 years of his era.
While he was juggling Sherlock and other projects as well.
It is baffling to me that he managed to, as successfully as he did, run Sherlock and Doctor Who simultaneously.
Easy to forget as well, like the insane popularity that Sherlock had then as well. They were both TV giants at one time. And then flash forward to the end of Moffat's era. It goes that he apparently had to kind of plead with Chibnall to take over the role, which strikes me that the BBC didn't have another replacement in mind, that there were limited options, and it sort of had to be Chibnall. And then flash forward again, we've talked about this a bit, where by certain accounts at the end of Chibnall's reign, there was something of a succession planning problem where the show very could well have ended with Chibnall, or at least gone on to some kind of hiatus, Wilderness 2.0, with a lack of successor and RTD kind of swooping in at the last moment or at just the right time to take on the role and take the show to the next level. Yeah. So it gives an impression that, I guess, as well, there's a lot said, I think, inside books like kind of the writer's tale, which Ross T. Davies did, which is all about making the show, that it's not a great job. You are trying to kind of baby the fans and keep them happy. You have to be the TV professional. You have to, I think, pour all of your creative energy into this and be able to write huge amounts, oversee other people's scripts, change what they're doing as well, have a really clear vision for what you want to achieve, keep coming up with fresh and new ideas, keep up with trends, like what's happening in television, and you have to have some real foresight about what's not just in now, what's going to be popular in a year and a half, what's going to work. It doesn't sound like it's a huge amount of fun, and you kind of almost have to be willing to burn out for this. Yeah, it's a full-time job. This is why it's so baffling to me about Stephen Moffat doing Sherlock as well, is that it just seems like an all-consuming full-time job, especially like when you look at the Chibnall era, where he had 2 full, quote-unquote, series of Doctor Who, with series 11 and series 12, and then sort of 13/Flux. I mean, also it was very much a COVID series. It was a product of the time. They had 6
episodes and then three specials, including the New Year special. And it wasn't like a full normal series. And that was all consuming. I don't believe he was doing Broadchurch at the time, if I'm correct. Like, I don't think he was like investing his time into other shows in the same sense that Stephen Moffat was with Sherlock. And it just seems like a bloody hard job. And also, the fans are so fickle with, you know, I mean, myself included, with all the fans, so fickle as to what they like. I was like, oh, I'm going to hate Stephen Moffat's era because I loved Russell so much. And then I really grew to like fall in love with Matt Smith and the sort of fairy tale writing of Stephen Moffat. And then the same thing happens with Chibnall, where it's like, it's a whole new thing and you kind of begrudgingly go into a new era. And I can only assume the showrunner faces like a lot of hate or opinion. It's like the fans don't even really know what they want. They keep shouting at them. And so it seems like a very hard role.
Well, I think I used to think I had a very clear idea of what I wanted. And then I think the more that we learn about Series 14 and the upcoming specials, the more I think I don't have a clue. I really don't have a clue because everything I hear excites me. So on the day that we're recording this, which says something about how far ahead we're planning this, guys, look how organized we are. We've just had the news today on the 3rd of April that we're recording this that Jinx Monsoon has been cast in a significant...
I would never have seen that coming.
No, in a significant new role. And it's nothing like anything I would have imagined doing. But as soon as it's announced, I'm like, whoa, like, okay, here's a really interesting idea. And I love the way that basically Russell has looked at the landscape, looked at drag bans in the US, looked at all these attacks on trans people and just gone, you know what, screw it. I'm going to put a 2-time Drag Race winner in a monumental role in Doctor Who.
And the thing is, it's that they're not even playing like a new character for Doctor Who. I mean, we don't know what character they're playing in Doctor Who, but from the promotional images that they've released, it looks like Jinx is literally playing Jinx Monsoon. I mean, I'm sure they're not, but they are made up as Jinx Monsoon. And it does feel, especially in, like you said, in the current climate, like a very conscious decision from Russell to be like, we are including drag in Doctor Who. Drag is universal. I heard a quote recently, I mean, not to, you know, this is a whole other episode to get into, but I heard a quote recently where they were saying that drag has always been here and it always will be here. And it's just a recent change that people are trying to make. And I think that was a ballsy decision from Russell, one that I'm very excited to see play out.
We are literally the nation of pantomime. Like, I mean, how on earth? I mean, shut up. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? Like the climate at the minute is just absurd, the climate around drag. Anyway, we're getting off topic. I mean...
to bring it back round to Doctor Who.
Let's start with a simple question, Sam. How many episodes... Okay, this maybe isn't such a simple question. How many episodes should a series have? Because something Russell talked about in Doctor Who magazine is that series are kind of getting a bit shorter, and looking around at what other shows are putting out, like prestige kind of HBO shows, Netflix series, they're getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah, no, they are. You're completely right. So my answer, the more I thought about it, changed in that I have so much nostalgia for Russell's era that immediately I want to say 13 is the perfect like amount of episodes because that's what they did. And I don't necessarily think that's true. For me, I believe that series 14 is going to be 8 episodes long, and that is very coherent with a lot of shows. The most recent show I worked on for Disney, which again sort of is in line with what they're doing with Doctor Who, is going to be 8 episodes. And for me, 8 episodes is a little short. When I heard they were doing an 8-episode series, I was like, especially if they're releasing it weekly, I was like, that is a little bit short for me. I think 8 episodes works well in a series drop on a streaming service because you can watch them all within like a day or two. I think for something like Doctor Who, which I also think should never be dropped at once on a streaming service, I think it has to be released weekly.
Oh God, never. Yeah.
I actually think the perfect amount of episodes is 12. For me,
I feel like 12 feels about right, and I think it's for the same reason. To me, this is kind of a stupid way of approaching it, perhaps, but it's not so much about like the stories you can tell inside 12 episodes. It's more about how long I want the conversation to happen. For example, I feel like The Last of Us just kind of came and went. That was such a great show. I really enjoyed watching The Last of Us, but I feel like it was over so quickly.
Me too.
Like it was a little like blip, and then like all the conversation around it goes with it. And I find that a shame.
Yeah, no, completely. And you've really got to think about how... 8 weeks. 8 episodes is 8 weeks. 8 weeks is 2 months.
I can't have that. That's too short.
Exactly. And quite often, like, when you're doing something like, say, on a streaming service as well, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, you might do a double premiere where you post 2 episodes at once. I don't think Doctor Who would ever do that, but even so, the most that your series will run for is 2 months, and I think something like Doctor Who has to go across 3 months. It has to be a real chunk of the year. It is a part of the conversation. You want kids going to school talking about it. And much as I love 13 episodes, I get that is a very long series and a very demanding schedule, especially with like a bigger budget and what you might want to include within a series, like visual effects wise and camera wise. But I think 8 episodes is way too short. And I also think you have to balance how many 2-parters you want to do with how many solo episodes. And I think 12 is the perfect mix for that. What about you? What do you think is the perfect length?
I mean, maybe we can compromise and say 10. Maybe 10's right. But I guess as well, like, look, if we're going to pick and it's going to have to be one or the other, let's say that we really would prefer quality over quantity. And it's tricky to put together kind of these big, high-budget episodes. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I suppose as well, we now know, I mean, not officially confirmed, but, you know, a lot of outlets are reporting there's going to be a unit spin-off led by Gemma Redgrave. So I suppose with the cultural relevance piece, there will be more happening in the kind of Doctor Who universe on TV that keeps it in kind of the conversation a bit more. I think even this year with having the 60th anniversary specials, though, even though there's only going to be 3, I assume they're going to be paced from the end of November up till Christmas, and then we'll have the Christmas special, and that will create a bit of a buzz kind of for a few months off the back of something that's only going to be shown kind of 3 times on TV, right?
Yeah. Well, see, because this is what I can't decide. And obviously, they haven't announced anything, so it's all speculation at this point. But I don't know if they are planning on... I think they'll either do one of 2 things. They'll either do exactly what you said, which is episode 1 will air on the 23rd of November, and then they'll pace that between the end of November and Christmas, which makes sense because we know we're getting a Christmas special. We know that the 60th specials will be 3 episodes. And so they could have, you know, the 23rd of November, the first week of December, the second week of December, a week off, and then the Christmas special. Or what I can also see them doing is in the first week of November, having an episode, second week of November, having an episode, third week on the 23rd, having the finale. And then it's
concluding
the finale
on the anniversary.
Concluding on the anniversary. And then you have, because, you know, you've waited by this point, a year for these specials. You then have 1 month to like speculate what's going to happen. And then it's another special. Because they are naming it a special. I think if they're doing 4 episodes together, that's almost a mini series.
I love it. Should we talk about some of our ideas for the show? So we've been handed the keys or the keyboard, and we've kind of fought off a panic attack. We're okay with it. We're cool with it. We're at peace
Deep
with
breaths.
it. We're feeling weirdly confident about it, actually. Perhaps we're even guaranteed success.
Oh, I'd love that.
What kind of ideas are we bringing to the table? I can start with a wild card if you like.
Yeah, no, I want to hear your thoughts.
This is one that's been going around on Twitter that I really think is genius, and I love this idea. I die for this idea. So we've seen the Master Missy done quite recently, and I think the Master Missy needs a bit of a gap, but love the idea of the Master being played by an actor who was previously a companion. So a Jenna Coleman Master, a Billie Piper Master. I really think would be so spicy. And especially the idea that the Doctor thinks they're reuniting, but in fact it's a ploy, and the Master, being utterly insane, has intentionally taken the face of, you know, one of the previous companions, now looking perhaps a little older, because it's not going to be a completely perfect match, just to kind of mess with the Doctor and kind of all the emotion that comes with that, of kind of the Doctor versus a Master that looks like Rose Tyler. I think something like that would be so good and give the actors room still to bring something completely different on screen, because they're still playing a villain, even though they get a little bit of a chance initially to step back into the character. But of course, it's all a ruse.
That's so fun. I love it. I love the idea that they get to come back as an actor. It's a bit like when Billy came back and was playing the Bad Wolf. They get the opportunity to come back to the show, but they are playing a completely different character with a completely different spin. On that breath, I'll ask you this. What do you think of a previous actor who played the Doctor coming back to play the Master? Because we know that Matt Smith recently said that if they came back to Doctor Who, would love to play the Master. The Doctor meeting who they think is a previous incarnation of themselves, only to realise it's actually the Master. And then maybe they could become like a semi-series regular.
I think that's genius. I think it would have to be a one-off for me. I love it as a one-off. I think what would be even better is if, I mean, they rarely achieve this. They really rarely achieve this in Doctor Who marketing to keep, a lid on anything. But if they managed to convince the fans that it was a multi-Doctor story that we were getting, and it was a surprise to the fans as well that this wasn't the Doctor, or indeed we began to get clues over maybe a couple of episodes that something's a little bit off about this portrayal, and if they were feeling really daring, even play that so subtly in a way that people were like, Matt Smith's performance is a bit off, like it's almost like he's got how to play the character, and then time goes along and we go, oh okay, that would be really interesting. That'd be like an interesting risk to take. But I don't know. I mean, my counterpoint with that, though, would be, who do you bring back? Because there is a real risk, I think, of overusing certain actors.
I'll say this. You know what? You don't want to say it? I'll say it. You would not do it with David Tennant. You would not.
I wouldn't do it with David Tennant. I would not bring David Tennant back. I sort of feel like the 60th needs to be his last major outing for at least a while now.
I think if you're going to bring back an actor who played the Doctor to play the Master, it has to be someone the complete antithesis of the Master, meaning it has to be someone like, I mean, all the Doctors are loved, but it has to be like a lovable Doctor in that they are maybe a softer Doctor, a funnier Doctor, a sillier Doctor. So I'm thinking...
Evil Jodie?
I'm thinking Evil Jodie. I'm thinking 13. I'm thinking 11. And I'm also thinking 8. I think any of them could come back and play an evil
and the
Doctor.
Fans have been begging for 8 back.
Begging.
They'll be a little pissed off, won't they, about that?
But the thing is that they'd have the gag of, I think it would have to be a 2-parter, because you were saying it would have to be a one-off. I think something like the 60th specials, where like you think they're meeting the Doctor, like you said, they're maybe a bit off, but you're following them as the Doctor, they get to play that character. And then the cliffhanger is they realise and they say, didn't you know, Doctor? I'm the Master. And like then the next episode they are completely a new character playing their interpretation of the Master. Like, wouldn't that be a gag?
It would be such a gag.
Such a gag. I love it.
Sam, off the back of the Master, I know you'll have some thoughts about the Rani. I don't know an awful lot about the Rani, and I've never watched a Rani story. But the Rani is such an interesting character, right? Because she is kind of the Doctor's equal. She's as, if not more, intelligent than the Doctor, but so focused on their goal, on their research, that they are willing to kind of throw morality out the window, which is what distinguishes them. What do you give me everything?
I have been clamoring, and I'm hoping that, dear listener, you might feel the same, for the Rani to come back to Doctor Who. It is long overdue. So Kate O'Mara was the actress who originally played the Rani, and she did a fantastic job. She was what I love to call like deliciously evil. She was deliciously evil, featuring in Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy episodes of Doctor Who. And she was a time lady, again, like you said, very much the Doctor's equal, potentially more intellectually superior. She had her own TARDIS. She also featured in the infamous Dimensions in Time, which I loved.
Yes.
And I think her and the Master has a lot longer history in Doctor Who, so I do understand why they brought the Master back and why they have used the Master so much. However, like you mentioned earlier, I think the Master has become a little bit overused, and I definitely think, much as these ideas are so fun, I think the Master needs a break. And I was really, really hoping, because this is before obviously they were actively doing gender swap Time Lords, when Missy was being revealed in Dark Water, I was sure she was going to be the Rani. I remember watching it and I was like, it's the Rani. And you learn she has 2 hearts, and she was saying like, don't you know who I am? And I was like, she's going to be the Rani. She's going to be the Rani. And then she said, Missy.
I very well keep calling myself the Master now.
I mean, that was a gaggy line, and I was gagged, but I was a bit like, we hadn't just had the Master, because the 11th Doctor never faced the Master.
Yes.
But I do think it was a missed opportunity to reintroduce a new female Time Lord, who I also, to my knowledge, and again, I'm a bit hazy on this, I don't think ever had like a final on-screen death. I mean, the Masters had many on-screen death, but
they
like
didn't.
They could come back.
I did have a look on, God bless the editors of TARDIS Wiki, the ultimate resource that I have no doubt the writers of Doctor Who use, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Just a complete encyclopedia of Doctor Who. I don't believe there ever was a death on screen. I think it's that there's maybe a reference in a Big Finish audio to the idea that River Song says that the Doctor thinks the Rani is dead post-Time War.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I think, it. I don't think there's anything more concrete than that says that she perished in the Time War.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. The Doctor, obviously, when we meet them at the beginning of New Who, thinks they're the last of the Time Lords. And before, Gallifrey came back and then was destroyed again, I mean, even after it's been destroyed again by the Master, the only two Time Lords we know to continually be coming in and out is the Doctor and the Master, or constantly in this dance. And you know what? I think it's the Rani's turn to interject this dance because she is such a delicious villain. It can be any interpretation, but there are so many actresses I have in mind that could play the Rani, and just it's time. It's time for the Rani to come back.
There's actually an actor that Rusty Davies said he would cast as the Rani if he brought her back.
Who?
I can't remember where that was said. Her name is Ruthie Henshall. And she has appeared in a number of Broadway productions, West End productions. She has also been on TV in Doctors. Mm-hmm. And she was also in Rusty Davies', what was it called? Wizards versus Aliens or something?
Wizards versus Aliens, yeah.
And so I think that's where the link is from.
I can see that. I'm just looking up her now, and I can see her. You can see it, right? Yeah, she is very emblematic of the Rani. I can see that.
Let me give you one more idea. I'm going to read this. I've stolen this from a Reddit user.
Go for it.
Lost the username. I'm so sorry. But I'm crediting Reddit vaguely. I'm not claiming this is my own idea. It's fantastic. They were sort of saying, what if the Doctor faces the Rani and the Rani is willing to do something really, really terrible to solve a particular problem? And the Doctor, having a very keen sense of right and wrong, defeats the Rani. But the problem then gets much worse in kind of the next few episodes. So the Doctor is then faced with all the consequences of not doing whatever it was the Rani wanted to do in the first place. And then in rectifying that, the Doctor ends up having to go too far, horrifying the companions. So you could end up basically with a very interesting kind of moral dilemma story where it was in the first place, the Rani was okay, well, we need to do XYZ to fix this problem. And the Doctor's whoa, no. Never, that's never the right thing to do. And then as soon as that stopped, the Doctor's plan doesn't work either. And it turns out the Rani was kind of right. Would be an interesting one to explore. So I thought that was a genius idea. I don't know if I explained that very well, but I loved it.
No, you did. It really reminds me of the Monk storyline from Series 10, where Bill knew what she had to do to sort of solve the situation, and the Master, or Missy, was saying, the person who made the deal with the monks has to die, and then the problem would be solved. And Bill was well, that's me, I have to die, I guess. And the Doctor's no, that's never the way. And I think they do end up solving it in another way. So obviously, the morality wins, I guess, in that episode. But it would be interesting to have an episode where, the Doctor is presented with a difficult choice for an easy outcome. And they go, no, you can't do that, it's morally wrong. And then have to deal with the consequences of that. And I like the idea that maybe for 3 or 4 episodes, you're slowly seeing things crumble around them by facing those consequences. Because very rarely the Doctor has to face the consequences of their action. They can kind of jump between places and dot here and there. And I feel like Series 1 did this really well. I mean, we've spoken about this again on the podcast, but where, especially with the finale, the Doctor's oh my God, I made this world, from things 5, 6 episodes prior. It would be really interesting. I would love, if I was the showrunner, to see the Doctor have to really deal with the consequences of their actions.
Yes. There was also the idea that what if, maybe only temporarily, the companions even defected to travelling with the Rani instead of the Doctor? Maybe too far. But an interesting one. You know who I'd like to see as the Rani? I think would be such an interesting casting. Would be Ruth Wilson. I don't know if you ever watched Luther, but Ruth Wilson is the one who plays Alice Morgan. She was also in His Dark Materials.
I was going to say I know her from His Dark Materials.
Yes, I think she would be excellent.
I'm not even kidding. When I was doing my Googling and thoughts about this, she is the actress who I would bring in to play the Rani. I would bring in Ruth Wilson to play the Rani. I think she is the perfect, deliciously evil. Again, I think very similar. Not exactly the same as the character she was playing in His Dark Materials, but that kind of deliciously evil.
It'd be excellent. I wonder if she'd be worried about, being typecast too much into that kind of role. But Would love to see it. It'd be interesting
Love
as
to.
well to have like a character like the Rani as someone that the Doctor has to regrettably call upon now and then, kind of as a kind of a new kind of regular returning character. So every now and then it's like, oh my god, we're gonna need the big guns for this one, guys, and the Rani gets rung up.
I think the way that in series 9, I think they did it perfectly. Like Missy would kind of pop up every so often, and like in series 10 when she was in the jail, I didn't like that as much. But in series 8, and like kind of leaving into series 9 like a little bit, like the way they would come and call Missy, I think they could do that kind of thing with the Rani. I would love to see like a plot point maybe where it's about them having to unearth something. The Doctor, do you remember in the Doctor's Wife when they had the cube that he had with a message from a Time Lord?
Yeah,
Maybe something
I was
like,
really hoping they'd find some more Time Lords in that one.
I know. Maybe it would be a really fun callback to have that again, the cube come back, and it's about the Doctor finding a Time Lord, especially post Gallifrey being destroyed by the Master again, and being like, there's hope again. And the one they find is the Rani, and they're happy. But then, like, maybe the Rani's been, like, frozen like a stasis cube or something, and they come out and they are, like, in a world post-Time War. You know, they won the Time War, and then they were destroyed again, and they are, like, a vengeful Rani. Like, that'd be so fun.
Ooh, I think that segues quite nicely into one of my key points. It's an idea that I've discussed, I think, before on the podcast about my new Time Lord Society,
Ooh.
which I, in my head, think could be a way of keeping the Time Lords alive without bringing Gallifrey back. So we give the Time Lords a fresh, clean sheet and a whole new kind of lore to learn about. Without having to do the whole kind of Gallifrey's destroyed, undestroyed, in a pocket universe, unfrozen, frozen thing again, which would just be to say that essentially kind of either the Master didn't really destroy Gallifrey, or the Master did destroy Gallifrey, but some survived.
Yeah.
And these survivors, I like to have this idea that some of them have come to be quite fond of the Doctor, and they really revere the Doctor, and they've kind of taken on, you know, some of his quirks, or they think of those as quite admirable traits, and they've kind of started to reconfigure their society and their values around that. And they've started to sort of change like their idea of what they really value. So this like old kind of like hierarchical system of Time Lords and like all the pomp of it, and, you know, this kind of separation between people who like live out in the desert and people who live in the citadel, and, you know, this kind of like very rigid class system that seems to exist, and this sense of superiority that Time Lords have, like this idea of like dominion they have over the rest of the universe because they're just more advanced because they have time travel. That basically they'd like rethink a lot of that stuff, and they'd be like a whole new people to learn about. So they are the Doctor's people still, but they are kind of trying to work out what their new society looks like. I think it'd be quite interesting.
I definitely think it's interesting, yeah.
One of the reasons I think this could really work is that something we learned about the Time Lords is that their technology is so advanced and they are so arrogant that they have kind of stopped understanding how their own technology works. And it's kind of like magic to them, and they almost fear it, or they use it, but they don't understand it. And they still look to kind of their like founding Time Lords many kind of eons ago as kind of like the great architects of Time Lord society, because in a way they've kind of stagnated because they don't need to innovate again. Like they don't need to do anything beyond what they've already made. And it'd be quite interesting to almost see a new generation of Time Lord society post Time War, kind of almost like living in the ashes of their own empire, trying to like understand their own past and like make sense of their place in the universe now. I think you could make some really interesting allegories out of that with, you know, Britain's place in the world.
No, completely. And I also think that with the way that it seems like Doctor Who's going in the world of expanded media, where there'll be the main show and hopefully different spin-offs and stuff, I would love to see like maybe like a one-off miniseries, not even necessarily like a series with multiple seasons, of like the rebuilding of Gallifrey, where there's like the few Time Lords who are like, the old ways weren't working, we keep getting killed off, we, you know, are clearly not morally good, we need to change things. And it's about this little group of survivors reshaping what they think it means to be a Time Lord, because also we've learned as well that Time Lord is something they created. They're not like native Gallifreyans. It's something that like a society they've built, and for them to say, I am rebuilding this. We are creating a new thing. And then maybe once that miniseries finishes, the Doctor to then meet this existing new era of Time Lords.
I would love that. I think it'd be so fun for the Doctor at a point in a series, maybe pretty early on, to come across another Time Lord, but discover that they're not from the Gallifrey they know. They're from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the Doctor almost has to earn their trust or kind of convince them, no, I am the Doctor, or I don't know what it is. But essentially, like, earn being led back home by them. I think it'd be really interesting in a new series, for the Doctor to meet one of these new Time Lords and earn their trust and find their way back to wherever their new home is, wherever they're hidden. I think it'd be quite cool.
Definitely, I think so. I think that there's definitely some stories to be explored there. So one thing that if I was in charge of Doctor Who, one thing that I have always known I would do, and I think this speaks a lot to, the age that we are and the Doctor Who that we grew up with, I think that the Sarah Jane Adventures was very sadly cut off in a way that other spin-offs weren't. I think Torchwood had its rounded story that, to be honest, sort of ended at series 3 and then was extended at series 4, I feel, which was it was really fun. I loved Miracle Day, but I feel like Torchwood arguably has had its day and has finished its story. Obviously, the Sarah Jane Adventures was cut off when Elizabeth Sladen sadly passed away, and I think there are a lot of elements of that were left unfinished, and there are things that are also too good, I would argue, to leave just in a spin-off show. And I know that we are getting the Beyond Bannerman Road big finish, which will explore Rani and Clyde a bit more, but I think there are things from this that need to be brought to the main show. And there's a couple of things that I'm just gonna mention a couple of things that I would love to take from the Sarah Jane Adventures and bring them to the show.
Okay.
One of them, I think that Rani, I know that she is leading the Big Finish spin-off with Clyde. I think that she is such an interesting character that I don't necessarily think, beyond maybe a cameo, she should be like a reoccurring character in the show, because I think she is so independent that she doesn't necessarily need to be a companion with the Doctor. However, I think Luke Smith would be the perfect person to have, maybe not even as a main companion, maybe within like a trio with like a new character, like say Ruby Sunday, Luke and the Doctor, where Luke might be feeling lost in the world after losing his mum.
Yeah.
He's never really explored the universe and never really stepped in the footsteps of his mum in that regard. And he wants, maybe he can't save the world in the same way he did before. And I think that, we've never had a child of a companion travel with the Doctor, which is crazy considering that the show is now 60 years old.
Yeah.
I know that we will be seeing Donna's daughter in the upcoming 60th specials, but I don't, as far as I'm aware, believe she's going to be like a full-time companion. I think Luke would be the perfect companion. He also is, canonically confirmed to be queer. Russell T. Davies spoke about how if Elizabeth Sladen hadn't passed away, he was planning on having Luke come out as gay during the Sarah Jane Adventures, which we've spoken about it before, would be a monumental point for all of our childhoods. But to have a queer child of a companion full-time traveling with the Doctor would be amazing, and I think that Luke's story was left unfinished, and I think that could be picked up in Doctor Who so well.
I totally agree with you. I think that'd be really nice. I like the point that you made there about Luke feeling a little lost. What is his place in the world without his mum? And I think as well, I like what you said there about Rani. She is such an independent character. She's almost well placed to be her own Sarah Jane now. She learned so much from her. It's almost like, I don't know if they ever explained this in the kind of final farewell to Sarah Jane that they released. Who got Mr. Smith?
I think that so ironically, Rani was the last person to speak to Mr. Smith, but I believe, and anyone listening, feel free to correct me, I believe Mr. Smith gets shut down, but Rani is the last person. Like, Clyde has a little speech, and then Luke has a little speech, and I kind of thought Luke would be the last person to, close it, but it was Rani. Rani speaks to Mr. Smith, closes him down, and she says that she believes that Sarah Jane actually maybe didn't pass away then, she just left for one last adventure with the Doctor. And Rani really closed that piece out. And I think Rani could have her own miniseries as a Defender of the Earth, but I think that Luke needs the Doctor. And by this point, Luke's met the Doctor 2-3 times, I think, at this point. I think that Luke will be the perfect person to meet the Doctor, maybe in like not a great place in his life, maybe like we're saying, feeling a bit lost. And I think that he would need the Doctor to help him, and I think then he could also help the Doctor.
I really like that. I think that'd be nice.
And it would also be fun to see someone who is like almost intellectually equal to the Doctor. Like Luke is a smart, well, I was going to say kid. He would not be a kid anymore, but Luke is smart. It'd be fun to have someone like, I don't think we've really had that in New Who. Maybe River Song, but someone who like can keep up with the Doctor.
I wanted to say this. I don't want to get too stuck on this point because I know we have so much we want to talk about and we're already really into it today. We have so many ideas. But I do think we need to mix up the companions a bit. And maybe if there's 2 companions, for example, to have those be quite different people, so there is a different secondary voice.
Yes.
And maybe 2 companions who don't always agree with each other or see things in the same way. And I think Luke would really bring that, is that he would bring a very unique perspective to the way that he sees things, which would be very interesting. I don't think we'll get into it now, but there's so much that can be done with companions as well that would be really interesting, like whether that means bringing in like a historical figure or someone who's not from Earth, or bringing in someone who's not from the modern day. I think would be very interesting. You could easily have 2 companions who, you have one, outer space alien from the year 2100, and you have one companion from 1961, whatever it is, you could have those 2 then kind of riff off each other in a very interesting way.
Exactly. There's so much you can do. Also, in the Breakfast of Sarah Jane Adventures, I think that we need to have, and I would love this to be an overarching series villain, I'll just say it. I think the Trickster is too good of a villain to not come into Doctor Who.
So true.
So we've had the Trickster's Brigade feature in Doctor Who with the Beetle in Turn Left, and the Doctor has referenced the Trickster in the show. And as you know, the Trickster has featured many times in Sarah Jane Adventures, featured in 3 different series. I think what I would love to do if I had control of an entire series is I would have maybe 4 or 5 episodes of normal Doctor Who, and then a 2-parter with a villain that's trying to change time in some way that isn't the Trickster, but is one of the Trickster's Brigade. And at the end of that 2-parter, the Doctor references, they're part of the Trickster's Brigade. I met them helping a friend, Sarah Jane, and maybe name drops her. And then, the Doctor flies away in the TARDIS, and then the Trickster, how he sometimes appears and apparates, and you might hear that voice and be like, soon we will meet Doctor, because he's kind of a soothsayer. He can predict the future in a way that he's timeless and can see time. And then whatever the finale is, it's about a time-altering era in the same kind of way that Series 3 finale had that year that never was, that got undone. I think we end up in a world that the Trickster is controlling, the Trickster's reigned, and it's a real Doctor versus Trickster episode that somehow gets undone. And what I think would be a beautiful poetic justice would be if Luke is the one to stop the Trickster for good.
That would be excellent. A very nice resolution. Can I go one further with the Trickster idea?
Oh, go for it.
And say, in our expanded Disney universe of unlimited cash, a lot of people I know would like a bit of a Doctor Who what if. So what if the Doctor did regenerate into Rowan Atkinson and that was canon? We could have a Trickster's universe, which is actually a whole lot of fun, where actually sometimes it's not immediately obvious what the harm is. And we could actually explore some of those avenues where things that we've kind of previously had this, is it canon, is it not canon debate? We could really have the showrunner say, you know what, screw it, there is no canon. It's canon in the Trickster's universe. And everything that we was oh, right, but Lenny Henry's not a Doctor, right? It'd be oh, well, he could have been. And the Trickster makes it so.
Somewhere Joanna Lumley is still the Doctor.
Exactly. I just think you could just make it ridiculous, right? You could really go ham on maybe a 5-part Trickster series that's a one-off or something. I don't know, and that could be Luke's little spit. I don't know what it is, but that could be really funny.
I want a little epilogue to Dimensions in Time where you find out the reason all the Doctor Who characters ended up in EastEnders is because the Trickster made it happen.
Yeah. Just give it a nod to it. Just something that is so fan service just once would be funny. On the kind of thread there about canon and continuity, may I make one more suggestion as showrunner?
Yes, go for it.
I would really like to have Doctor Who commit one way or the other to either, I think, really tie in with our real world and commit to saying a lot of the events in Doctor Who kind of happen in something a lot like the world that you and I live in. And they've done kind of a lot, I think, in previous Who around, like, think of the series 2 finale, right, with the army of ghosts and stuff, and we had, like, on the TV we had Peggy Mitchell. The only spirits I serve in this pub. You'll know the quote.
Do you want me to do it?
Yes, please.
The only spirits I'm serving in here are gin, whiskey, and vodka. Now you heard me. Get out of my pub.
That, and then also the late great Paul O'Grady featuring in the end of series 4. What was that quote?
Oh, that was, I look up and there's all these moons and things. Have you seen him? Did you see him? I thought, what was I drinking last night? Furniture polish.
Amazing. Incredible.
You can always come to me for quotes.
I'd say either let's go heavy on building a continuity that we can keep referring back to. So there is like a clear sense of, you know, a Doctor Who universe that is perhaps more split off from our own world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, build that world out. So, you know, people remember alien invasions, and that changes the way that history plays out, because there have been Cyberman invasions, there have been Dalek invasions. People on Earth know what a Dalek looks like. People are familiar with that idea. And, you know, they used to talk a lot, I think, in Doctor Who as well, about the 21st century is, not to quote Torchwood, but is where everything changes, because the Doctor often talks about this being kind of the turning point where humans start reaching out to the stars, we start colonizing other planets, and in the real world, we're nowhere near any of that stuff. And it could be interesting in the Doctor Who universe, actually, like, they're not too far off. Like, perhaps there's some eccentric billionaires in the Doctor Who universe who can take people to the stars, and that is something that's going to start happening soon. And what does that mean? Like, what happens when humans do start landing in new colonies and discover these new worlds? And do you know what I mean? I feel like there's a bit that could be done there with building that continuity.
No, I love that. I think that there is definitely room to play with. At this point, the Doctor Who world is not our world. Like, it's a different world. One thing, just like from my childhood, which is funny coming off of that, is I remember my parents used to actually get really annoyed when they would use a real world newscaster in Doctor Who. So when they would say, like, it's BBC News, and they would have an actual BBC News reporter within the context of the episode, like, reporting something that was happening, they'd get really annoyed by it, and they would say that they felt it was like blurring the lines a bit too much, where people were watching it and it was almost too real, and that didn't really sit well with them. Personally, I thought that was a bit sensitive, and I thought, it's just a show, get over it. But it's an interesting point, I think, like, maybe making Doctor Who a fictional world, and even within, like, say, you know, the Prime Minister in The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords is a fictional, you know, Prime Minister, obviously with Harold Saxon, and a fictional president. But then Barack Obama is the president in The End of Time, and, like, they kind of pick and choose when they want to have something real and have a real person feature in it. Obviously, they feature a lot of historical characters, so it's interesting. Maybe Doctor Who could even play into the fact of creating a historical episode with a completely fictional historical character made just for that episode. Like, I don't, to my knowledge, think that's something that's been done before, and I think that could be really fun.
Yeah, I think anything that's happened since 1963 is now its own history, right? Because anything pre that, Doctor Who tries to at least make it kind of make sense that people don't remember history that way. Like, one Rose is like, but there weren't zombies walking around in 18 whatever year it is they land, and, you know, it's like, oh well, no, like, history can be rewritten. Like, maybe there were. But, you know, beyond that, you know, pretty much they try to, like, wrap it up with a bow. So it's like, oh no, history is still nice and safe. But I think, like, from 1963 onwards, like, you know, why not? Like, you know, let it be a new history that's interesting. It's what our world would be if the Doctor and his foes existed, I think, is an interesting one.
I think so too. That'd be so fun. I know, obviously, this whole episode we've been talking a lot about nostalgia and, like, what we would bring back and, like, existing things within the universe. But I do think it's important, and I'm not going to lie, this is a whole other episode, I think, in itself. I don't have any ideas right now. I am not the showrunner, honey. But an important part of being the showrunner for Doctor Who is also bringing new things to the show. And I think you have to create a whole new world. Something I would love to see is, we often see aliens coming to Earth. I want to go to more planets. I want to see more alien civilizations. Not even in the regard of, like, Monster of the Week, but just, like, meeting new civilizations and, like, villages and people and, like, aliens. I want to see new things, and then also have new monsters coming to Earth also, but with new motivations. Like, you know, I love how the Slovene, they weren't invading Earth because they wanted to take over the world. They were coming to mine its resources and, like, sell it and make money. And I thought that was a really original concept for an alien invasion, and the way they did it as well, with like the hoax, the fake alien to distract everyone while they were secretly like planting the seeds of their real plan. I think that as the showrunner, it is very important to create new monsters and new aliens, because I think there's kind of a distinguishable point between the two. Monsters and aliens aren't always necessarily the same thing, but
No.
that is something that as a showrunner you would need to bring, and I do not have any ideas for that right now, but anyone listening, please, if you have any ideas for new monsters and aliens for the show, please let us know. I mean, hey, hopefully if anything goes well, we'll all be running the show in 5 years, so you never know.
My final, I guess, I think important point as well is to talk about things that happened behind the scenes with being a showrunner, because it's not all just storylines, but it's also bringing in the right talent and featuring the right people, making great casting decisions. So we also wanted to talk about that. It's insane that there wasn't a single writer of color on the show until 2018. Happy to be fact checked on that, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. And I've also heard that Chibnall's era had as many female writers as Moffat's and Davies' eras put together.
That's crazy. That's wild to me.
It is. And it's not to say like, oh, those weren't great stories, or, there's any malice in that, but it's ridiculous that they're not, getting more talent than that, I think, into the room, because Doctor Who is such an important, potential place as a springboard for new talent, because, writers from different backgrounds can tell all kinds of interesting and different stories, and they're so much more rich and interesting for being authentic and based on your own experiences. It's so obvious, I think, when you write something that's rooted in what you know and people and things you've experienced, versus kind of more shallow stories about things that are not rooted in your own experience.
It is crazy, because I was looking this up, and as of 2018, because as you said, there were as many female writers in Chibnall's era as there were in Russell and Stephen Moffat's eras combined. But as of 2018, throughout all of Doctor Who's history, from 1963 to 2018, only 4 women were credited as writers on the show, and I'll say who they were. They were Rona Munro, Catherine Tregenna, Helen Rayner, and Sarah Dollard. Helen Rayner, who was the first female writer in New Who, this wasn't until Daleks Manhattan Evolution of the Daleks, which was in Series 3, like midway through Series 3. That was the first time, and because, not to say it's understandable, because it should never be understandable, but people can accredit a lot of things that happened in Classic Who to, it's a product of its time. But the fact that it got brought back in the 2000s, and it still took 3 years for a single woman to write on Doctor Who, and to my knowledge, and again, fact check me if I'm wrong, I think that she was the only female writer in the entirety of Russell T Davies' era, which then took us up to 2009. That's crazy to me.
It's possible. It's possible as well, because I think when you have a white man as the showrunner, and that showrunner wants to be the one writing maybe half of the episodes of their series exclusively, right away you've got to then look at, okay, like what am I doing with the rest of the talent in the room? Like, who else is contributing who isn't me? Who's bringing a different experience and a different perspective to this? I really hope as well, like, I'm sure they're doing this more now. I really think they probably are more focused on this than before. And I think especially with what we were saying about the continuity problems that have existed in the past, I think they really will be thinking about, like, how do we bring in fresh talent? How do we kind of identify people who could be the showrunner 10 years from now? How do we bring in people who are like newer to this industry but are really promising and can tell really exciting stories? How do we give them a spot to maybe, co-write something, so they bring something that's kind of halfway there, and then it gets a great treatment, and it's brought up to like a really polished standard, or I don't know.
I really hope that, and we recently interviewed Beth Axford, who's the author of the Doctor Who quiz book on Wholala. Hi Beth. But she made a really great point about how the way that I think Doctor Who will really truly progress well in the future is a proper sort of collaboration and handover between people who have successfully done it before and know what they're doing with Doctor Who, meaning Bad Wolf Productions and Russell and Phil Collins and all of that, into a team of people who are kind of like our generation. So in the way that they were a group of people that grew up with classic Doctor Who, especially during the Wilderness Years, like wrote their own projects and stuff, and then were like, we love the show, we grew up with the show, and we now know what we think should happen with it. And all the people who grew up with New Who, like, I mean, you know, people are now 18 years old who were not born until Doctor Who was already back. Do you know what I mean? We are the generation of people who grew up with New Who are now in the industry. We're working in the industry. I think that Doctor Who will succeed when there is an amazing handover between this incredible team who have run it and know what they're doing into a new and diverse group of people who have the same love and respect for the show that they did, but come from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of areas, and who might not have had the opportunity, you know, in the mid-2000s to run the show and do what they wanted to do. I think that these are the people who will then take Doctor Who and really run with it and really make incredible TV.
Mwah. That's a big mwah to that point. Mwah,
Chef
mwah, mwah.
kiss.
Chef's kiss on that one. That was a beautiful way of articulating that. I made some really horrible points up until you said that. My brain is shutting down at this time of night. It's like,
do you know what, Alasdair? I think we can love and dream and think about what we want to do as a showrunner, but I think there's like a whole mini series of ideas that we could do then, and we can't fit them all into one episode. But I think that what we've covered today is already a Whoniverse, pardon the pun, of ideas and thoughts and what we'd love to see. And yeah, I think seeing more diverse people behind the scenes to create more interesting things on screen.
Faux show. Yeah, this has been so much fun, Sam. I love talking about this. I mean, we're always bubbling away with these ideas. At the moment, I'm just so excited, truly, to see what happens next. I think at the moment, I've stopped like dreaming about like what would I do with it, because it feels like every few weeks right now we're just getting another piece of what's coming up, and these little teeny weeny teasers are keeping me happy at the moment. You know, we're only in April. We've got all the way until September yet. No, not even September, November. A good another, how many months is that? 7. Good addition. It's a good another 7 months. So I'm just so excited to see what happens next. I really, really trust the team who are running this right now. So yeah.
Yeah, exciting things ahead. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this little chat through some of the ideas, just a few of the ideas of what we would love to do if we were showrunner. But as always, we would love to hear what you think too. Please let us know on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, all of which are at Wholala Pod. Let us know, what would you love to see in upcoming series? What would you do if you were running the show? You can reach out to us on any of those platforms, and you can also rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, also at Wholala Pod.
Yes, and if you have a moment, we would very much appreciate a review. If you have a couple seconds to rate us, anything above a 3 is great. A 5 is super ideal.
We would love a 5.
We'd love a 5. We're really gagging for that 5. It means a lot to us. It really helps with the rankings. It helps us find new Whovians, and it gives us our daily burst of serotonin. But yes, guys, thank you so much for being with us on this journey. We're very grateful for you being here. We love hearing from you. Do ping us a message over at Wholala Pod.
Thank you so much. Well, until next time.
Au revoir.
Bye.